My name's Gerald Brooks, and I pastor in the North Dallas area, and I'm going to take a few moments. And when I come, I don't come as a speaker. I come as a pastor. See, all I've ever done is pastored people. I'm with people on their best day, and I'm with people on their worst day. I'm with people when they feel like they're on the mountaintop, but I'm with people when they feel like the mountain's on top of them. And so I'm just going to pastor you today. So I want to begin by praying for you. Father, in the name of Jesus, I just thank you so much for the people that are in this room. I know that if they're here, they're in the pursuit of you. And I thank you that because they're in the pursuit with you, that you're doing great things in their life. Now, I need your help, Lord, because I don't know them. I don't know their backgrounds. I don't know the settings that they're coming from, but you do. See, you know everyone in this room. You know the good, you know the bad, you know the things they dream, and you know the things they dread. You know the things that they tell everyone, and you know the things that they tell no one. Therefore, you're the one who can minister. And I pray today that you are going to unlock the unique combination of their hearts, and you are going to help them, Father, to grow in you. And it is our prayer that when it's all said and done, that you are going to help them to be more like Jesus than ever before. That is our prayer in the mighty and precious name of Jesus. And we all agree together saying, Amen. Well, today I want to talk to you about God's promise for the storms. God's promise for the storms. See, you don't have to study the Bible or really be an in-depth scholar of the Bible to know that the Bible spends a lot of time talking about stormy weather days. You go in the Old Testament and you run into Noah. All of you know that Noah's life centered on some bad weather days. Everything that's going to happen is based on bad weather. You go a little bit further, you run into a man named Jonah, and Jonah is going to have his defining moment with God during a bad weather day. You go a little bit further in the New Testament, and you see 12 individuals that Jesus chose to be a part of his team. I don't know what it is, but every time you put those 12 guys in a boat together, something was going to happen. I like to put it this way. It's like one of those bad Carnival Cruise Line trips. Something was going to happen if you put those 12. But if you go a little bit further in the Bible, you come to Acts 27 and you read about Paul. And I just want you to hear this verse. In Acts 27:20, it says, "The terrible storm raged." Now, I need you to get it. When the Bible begins to give a qualifier, it is important. This isn't the kind of storm that started in the morning and it ended at night. This isn't the night storm that was gone by morning. This is a terrible storm. The Bible is trying to get you to see the picture. This is one of those storms that when you're in the midst of it, you're thinking, man, what is going to happen next? What is going to occur? And it says that it raged for several days. And so this isn't the storm that just goes for a few days. It just keeps going day after day after day. And then it utters these words. It says, we couldn't see the sun, the moon, the stars. We couldn't see anything above us. They had lost all perspective, but it's these words. All hope was gone. See, I pastor people. And when you pastor people like I've pastored, you know that a lot of people at times can lose hope. You know that people in their marriage can lose hope, and they've lost all hope that their marriage will be any better, that somehow the problems that they have, that they'll be any better. I've watched people with their kids lose hope, that they just get concerned and they think, my kids will always be this way. I've watched people in their careers lose hope. You know what? I thought I would advance. I thought life would be different, but now I'm just stuck here, and they've lost all hope. And there's nothing worse in life when you're going through a period of time of stormy weather. It doesn't seem to end, and you begin to lose hope. Let me build a bridge. Several years ago, I was flying, and as I was in this particular plane, I can literally remember the moment that I got out of my seat. I'm going to the overhead. I'm going to get a book out that I needed to research. But as I reach in to grab that book, I am going to see the brightest light I've ever seen in my life. When I talk about bright lights, like right now, because I've got glasses on, I've got a glare hitting me because of these lights. They're trying to broadcast and create signals, so they've got to create lights. But I can still see that my hand is there. But this light was so bright that it blinded you. I couldn't tell that my hand was where it is right now. I couldn't see it. The light was that intense. It was that bright. I knew my hand was there because, I can feel it attached to my arm, but I couldn't see it. Simultaneously with that, take whatever the loudest sound that you have ever heard, multiply that, and that happens. Now, I want to be honest with you. As soon as I saw that bright light, as soon as I heard that sound, here's what I thought. This is what happens when your plane is blowing up. Right before it begins to tear apart, you see this light, you hear this sound, it's just incredible. But the whole time that we're flying, the plane never tilts, it just stays steady. It's just this giant light and this giant sound. And then all of a sudden the light dissipates, the sound goes away, everyone in the plane is just stunned. No noise is being made. Very similar to how you're responding to my sermon right now. And so, absolutely nothing's happening, nothing's going on. Pilot doesn't come on, but I learned something about flying that day. When the pilot isn't talking, that's good news. Because I watch on TV when something happens on a plane, they say, well, the pilot didn't say anything. The less talking, the better news they have. Because here's what they're taught. Fly the plane first, talk second. And if they're not talking, it means the plane can fly. So literally for 4 minutes, we're just sitting there stunned. I mean, people are looking around. They don't have a clue what's going on. And then the pilot comes on. And he says, we just had one of those rare occurrences that happens in flying. And that is that our plane has been struck by lightning. And he says, because of that, we've gone through our checklist to make sure that all of our equipment is operating perfectly. It is in perfect order. We're proceeding to our destination. He then literally utters these words. I've never heard it on a plane before this. And he says, but because this is such a disconcerting and alarming kind of experience, I've told the flight attendants it's now open bar. Whatever you want is now on us. Now, here's the deal. I don't drink. I'm a pastor. I just don't drink. And sometimes people will sit there and say, well, you're a pastor and that's the reason you don't drink. No, the reason I don't drink is I've done this for 42 years and no one's ever come to me and said that they're a better husband because they drink, they're a better wife because they drink, they're a better dad because they drink, they're a better mom because they drink, that they're better. I've never heard it, and since no one's ever told me it made them better, I just didn't choose to do it. So for me, all that meant was I had unlimited peanuts available to me. And so peanuts are going to come my way. But the pastor next to me, that was the day he started drinking. Now, what I want you to know is he's been through rehab twice now. He's about to get out, and we think this one took. But can I tell you something? When you're on that plane and your plane gets hit by lightning, you don't want to be there. Nobody wanted to be there. No one wants to have that feeling, this is my plane exploding. Nobody wants it. See, here's what I can tell you about storms. Nobody gets up in the morning and prays like this. God, send me a storm. Send me a storm into my life that's going to rattle the core of who I am, that is going to challenge everything that I believe, that is going to make me think and at times doubt. Send me a storm. Nobody prays that. You know what everyone prays? God, let this be a good day. Let this be a day filled with peace, filled with joy, filled with happiness. Let it be a day that I get to see your best. That's what we pray. See, nobody's praying for stormy weather. Everyone's praying for a good day. But here's the thing. Storms do come. And there's 4 things that you need to know about storms. Number 1 is this. Just because you're in a storm, it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. Now, let me say that to you slowly. Just because you're in a storm, something happens in your life. It seems like your career is blowing up. It seems like your marriage is blowing up. That it seems like life is beginning to blow up on you. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. See, when that plane got hit by lightning, no one said, the pilot sinned. Nobody looked around and said, who on this plane sinned for us to be there? Nobody does that. But you know what happens in churches? When something doesn't go right in life, we always assume that we did something wrong. We think for my life to be going through this, for me to be feeling this, for me to be facing this, then I did something wrong. But see, in John chapter 16 and verse 33, it says this. It says, in this world you'll have tribulation. Let me translate that from the Greek. In this world you'll have days that will be filled with trouble. In this world there will be days when you will have problems. In this world there will be days when things that you don't want to happen, and you will have to live through them. But Jesus says, but be of good cheer because I've overcome this world. But he said, in this world. How many of you are in this world? Some of you aren't sure. I don't know what you're coming down from, but I hope you come off of it pretty clear. Let me just help you. You're in this world, and there may be only one verse in the Bible that you're fulfilling, but you're fulfilling that one. Because if you got trouble, you're fulfilling that verse. But here's the thing. People who go to church, they always assume things when they go bad, they did something wrong. I'm a pastor. I was standing at the back door about 6 weeks ago on our Wednesday night service. And I'm standing there, and people are coming by, and they're just giving you the handshake, hey, pastor, and just giving you, just sort of that one word, hey, good to be here, that kind of thing. But every now and then when you do what I do, you notice people. And over to the side, there's this man. Now, this guy over here, I'm watching him. He's watching people come by me. But what I know is this guy wants to talk to me. It's more than, hey, pastor, great seeing you, good service, that kind of thing. He wants to talk. So I see as the line's beginning to sort of dwindle down, he's over there and he begins to look and he walks up to me. But this guy's a guy's guy. He's not just, a guy who you would say is somehow less. He's a guy's guy. And he walks up to me, and as he walks up, tears are beginning to run down his face. I look at him, I said, what's going on? He said, pastor, I just need you to tell me. I just need you to tell me. I said, tell you what? He says, can you tell me what I did? I said, did what? He says, just tell me what I did. If you'll tell me what I did, I'll fix it. I said, man, you got to give me some background here. I'm just not getting this. He says, I need to know what I did wrong. And I said, what are you talking about? And he began to describe 3 events that were unfolding in his life. He says, I know for these things to be happening, I had to do something wrong. I looked at him and I said, have you asked God? Have you prayed and said, God, have I done anything wrong? He says, pastor, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, but God hasn't said anything to me. And I looked at him. I said, do you understand that you serve a big God, and you serve the kind of God that if you ask him a question, he'll give you an answer. And if you ask him and he didn't tell you anything, then most likely you did not do anything wrong. And he looked at me, he says, but I've confessed everything. And I said, that's great. 1 John chapter 1 and verse 9, it says that if we confess our sins, he's faithful. How many of you are glad God's faithful? Even when we're not faithful, God's a faithful God. And he said, I looked down and I said, God's faithful to forgive. So if you did and you've confessed everything, he's faithful. But I said, here's what you need to know. Because the adversary comes in and he says, you've done something wrong and you don't remember it. You've done something wrong and you can't recall it, therefore you can't confess it. And he gets you on this mental trap of thinking, I've done something, my life can't be better. But I looked at this guy and I says, God's faithful and just to forgive you. But then it goes on and says, and cleanse you of all unrighteousness. See, in our lives, when we confess what we readily know to be sin, God cleanses us of the things that we don't even know that we did. And I looked at this guy. I said, you got to take a step forward out of the darkness. You've got to understand that you're not in this circumstance because you did anything wrong. And if you did do something wrong, you confessed it, you've acknowledged it. But see, he thought the only way he could be in a storm was he did something wrong. See, as a pastor, I've watched Christians tear their souls apart. I've watched them try to find every little thing, and they tear themselves apart, and they tear themselves because their idea is the only way my life can be this way is because I did something wrong. I did something wrong. That's the reason I'm sick. I did something wrong. That's the reason my kids are this way. I did something wrong. That's the reason my marriage is this way. I did something wrong. But first principle, just because you're in a storm, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. But second principle, sometimes when storms come, you do not get any warning. You know, if you've ever played sports and it was a contact kind of sport, one of the things that you always want is a little bit warning. So if you see someone coming at you, you can just sort of position your body to absorb the blow, or you can begin to react and do it. But the hardest hit that ever happens in sports is the one you don't see coming. You're thinking, my goodness, I'm good. And all of a sudden from the blind side, you get hit. Well, what happens in life is sometimes we're not giving any warning. We're not giving any information that something's coming. See, it's like this. We want that warning. I live in an area in North Dallas, and the area that I live in, it's the tail end of what they call Tornado Alley. And Tornado Alley is basically this. You have warm air coming up from the Gulf, and then you have other air coming down from the mountains, and as this air is coming down from the mountains, it begins to collide, and you got hot air and moist air. They begin to collide, and it can start things to spin. So in our area, we have this siren system, and it's just amazing. If that siren goes off, it doesn't matter how hearing impaired you are, you're going to hear it. It is loud. It is loud. But it's designed to give people a warning to get out and to get cover, to begin to understand what's about to happen. It's that kind of thing. But there was one time in Plano, it didn't go off. And it did a whole lot of damage, not to people's lives, but to homes. And people in Plano were mad. They were mad because we didn't get any warning. The sirens didn't go off. And so all the elected officials were under a whole lot of stress. Why didn't the sirens go off? So they began to look into it. And here's what they found from the experts, is that if something happens west of our community, they see it coming and they can warn us. Occasionally in our area, there would be what they call a backup front. And if it comes to the east and it's moving from east to west, they can warn us. But that night, what happened was the storm formed right over Plano. It wasn't west of us. It wasn't east of us. It happened right on top of us. And they're sitting there and they said, we can't warn you when it happens right on top of you. Now here's the thing. I've dealt with people who'll say this: my life was perfect until that phone call. My life was perfect until that day. My life was perfect until that event. And they'll look at their life and they will sit there and say everything about life was perfect until that doctor's appointment. Everything in life was perfect until that meeting. Everything in life was perfect. And they'll say, my whole life got thrown upside down, and because of that, my life is a mess. And they look and they said, I didn't have any warning. I didn't have any knowledge this was going to happen. It just came out of the blue. Those moments are trying for us, because we want warning. We want to make sense of it. But when it happens immediately and your life goes from one thing to another, you're just sitting there and you're going, my goodness, let me build another bridge. I was flying from the West Coast to Dallas. Flying from the West Coast to Dallas, when you get close to Dallas, they do where they begin to drop into the landing pattern, where they begin to circle you around the area. And so they go from 30 to 35,000 feet, depending on which altitude they chose. And they begin to head you down, and they get you to about 20,000. At 20,000 feet is when you get in the landing circle, and you may be circling for a little bit, but that's when you get. Well, in this particular evening, what had happened was, if you looked at the radar in Oklahoma City, which is about 3 hours north of Dallas, you could see storms brewing. But if you went down to Waco, which is about 2.5 hours south of us, you could see that storms were brewing. Now, if you see storms in Oklahoma City and you see them in Waco, you know that there's a line forming. And even though there's not storms that you're seeing on the radar, you know that the air is conducive, so it's volatile. And so all the air between those 2 points has the mixture in it to create storms at any second. Well, those storms start building down. They're about at the Red River. They start building up. They're about to Waxahachie. And our pilot's looking at this, and he looks ahead and he says, hey, we're going to begin to descend and get further down into the landing pattern. And as we begin to descend, all of a sudden our plane falls. Now, when our plane falls, I want you to understand, it didn't nosedive. Our plane was flat, but it just went like this. It was as though someone had their hand on top of my hand, and it just went like that. I'm literally sitting in the seat. I look at the guy next to me. His computer literally goes all the way up to the ceiling, just level, hits the ceiling, comes all the way down. He also had been drinking beer that night. It went up, and when it came down, he was baptized in beer. And so I'm watching this, and you have this feeling the whole plane's just falling level, but it's just falling. It's like there's nothing under us. There's no air. There's nothing that's going on, and it begins to fall. Now, in the midst of that beginning to fall, it's one of those feelings you're thinking, what in the world's going on? Well, after a few seconds, you feel the pilot beginning to regain the plane and begin to reestablish altitude. And the pilot doesn't come on. He doesn't say anything. Good thing, because now he's flying the plane. But in a few minutes, he comes on and he says, what we just experienced, and I need you to remember this phrase, is extreme turbulence. Now, that term, extreme turbulence, I had never heard it before. I'd never heard that term, that description, but he said extreme turbulence. We land. Next day, I had been flying the all-night flight because my son Cody plays baseball and played in college, played in the minor leagues. I wanted to get back to one of his games, and so it was going to be a morning game. And so I get back, and I'm seated in the stand. The guy seated next to me was the number 7 pilot for Southwest, the number 7 pilot they ever hired at Southwest. He's sitting next to me. And so as we're sitting there, the game's going on, and I look at him, and I said, man, last night we just had some really, really strong turbulence. And he's a pilot. He just sort of looked at me. He said, well, Gerald, you know, turbulence are usually just, you know, warm air beginning to ascend, and as it ascends, you feel the ripples and bump. I said, that just wasn't that last night. And so he's just sort of humoring me with pilot talk. I said, our pilot said it was extreme turbulence. When I said that, it was like his head snapped. He looked at me, he said, what did he say? And I go, extreme turbulence. He said, are you making that up? I said, I had never heard that term before. He said, do you know what that means? I said, I don't know what it means, but I know what it feels like. He says if he declared extreme turbulence, that means when that plane lands, it's taken out of service. He's declaring that there was a period of time when the plane was unflyable, that the aerodynamics around it did not permit it to have flight. He was not flying it. It's the only time that a pilot will ever acknowledge that they weren't able to fly the plane. He was at the mercy of what was happening. And he said that. I said, yes. And he said, do you know what that means? When that plane comes down, they have to check every weld spot. When you get on a plane, you see things that are about the size of a dime or a quarter, depending on the model. He says each one of those they have to check because the stress on that is so much that they got to make sure that it wasn't fractured. They got to check. I said, well, here's what I can tell you. I had to check some spots on me last night. And I said, and some of them were leaking. But you know what was hard about that? There was none of this where the pilot came on and he said, turbulence ahead. See, when they say that, you feel a little bit better when it's happening because you know they know what's going on. They get it. But there was none of that. All of a sudden, we were here and we were here and we're sitting there and we're feeling this and it's just so sudden. And as a pastor, I watch people whose lives get turned over. But you need to know about storms. You need to know that sometimes when storms begin to occur, it's not your fault. And there are times when you're not going to get any warning. But number 3, storms always tell you what's really inside you. They tell you what's inside you. See, Jesus in Matthew chapter 7, he said this. He said, there's a man that hears my sayings, but he doesn't put them into practice. And because he does not put them into practice, it says when the winds come and the rains come, Great is the fall of that house because they built on sand. But then he goes on and he says, but there's another man that hears my sayings and puts them into practice. And the rains come and the winds come. But when they come, his house stands because it was built on a rock. Now here's the thing, the winds and the rains, they come to everybody. They come to the believer, the non-believer. They come to the person who thinks there is a God and the person who thinks there is no God, the person who's close to God and the person who's as far away as you can get from God. But what storms do is they show us what's inside. They show us how we built our lives, that we build our lives on what God said during those particular moments. Because if we did, we're going to make it. And maybe your marriage looks bad, but you're going to make it. Maybe your kids look bad, but you're going to make it. Maybe life looks bad, but you're going to make it. But if you just heard them and you didn't do them, great is the fall. Let me illustrate. We were flying out of LaGuardia. In LaGuardia, in the New York area, there are 3 airports. You have Newark over here, you have JFK over here, and you have LaGuardia right here. Now, these are 3 major airports, and since they're close together, if you could look down from heaven, you see a circle here, and you see a circle here, and you see a circle here. And these are the planes that are just circling around these areas. They're going like this, they're going like this. But because you can't let these circles intermingle, it would be disaster. When you take off from LaGuardia versus a gradual kind of thing like you would have even at Orlando and you would have in Dallas, they take off at a steeper angle. So versus going like this, they're going a little bit higher because they want to get you up straight and get you out of the circular pattern. Well, we're taking off, and I need you to see this. I'm seated here on the aisle. This is me. Jenny, my lovely wife, whom I love with all my heart, she's seated here right next to me. Right behind me, cat-a-cornered, is my son, Cody. So you've got me on the aisle, Jenny next to me. 1 row behind, you have Cody. He's right behind Jenny. But right here, you have a lady who we don't know who she is. She just happened to get the seat. So, me, Jenny, Cody, unknown lady. We start taking off, and we get over 10,000 feet, and all of a sudden, you hear this noise. It's a clank, and the plane goes like this, and then it levels. You hear the clank again, but this time, the plane tilts and it goes like this. So now we're flying, but we're not flying level to the ground. We're flying like this. So if you're my son, he's in the window seat. Usually you would have to go like this and this to see the ground. Cody doesn't have to do that now. He just goes like that and he's seeing the ground because the plane's flying like this. This lady's sitting there. Same events happen. But all of a sudden, as soon as this goes like this, and you hear the other sound, it goes like this, my son goes Pentecostal. And he starts going, now, this lady that we know, she starts going with what she's got. She goes, blankety blank, in the name of blank, holy blank, mother of all blank. And some of you know exactly what she is saying because that's how you talk. And so she's just going blank. Cody's going, shandarakahandalaba, blank, shandarakahandalaba, blank, mother of all blank, shotakahandalaba. And we're sitting there and I'm hearing this and I'm just right in front. I'm going, that's my son. He's praying in the Holy Ghost. She's praying in the Holy Ghost. I mean, he's got God right there. This lady's blanking. He's praying in the Spirit, blank. And all of a sudden, you're hearing this. And then my wife, whom I love so much, she stuck her hand between the seats and she starts patting Cody on the left. Oh, sweetheart, it's all right. Oh, sweetheart, it's all right. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to make it. We're going to make it. We're going to make it. He's going, and she's going to make it. Now, I'm sitting right next to her. I've been married to the girl over 40 years. I'm getting no love, but Cody's getting it all right there. And so right there, it's just going on his leg. Yeah, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. Well, the pilot levels the plane out. What had happened was we had lost an engine. Another rule of flying, always fly on a plane with 2 engines. Because it gives you an extra one if something happens to the one. So the pilot levels it out. He says, hey, we've lost an engine. We're going to have to return back. When we return back, I love this. I thought this was such excellent communication. The pilot says during the landing, now when we land, you're going to see a whole lot of fire engines and ambulances. They're just there to welcome us home.
I just thought that was just such a wonderful way. But here it is. Cody's been Shanda Kahan. This lady's blank blank. Shanda Kahan blank blank. See, the same event showed what was in both of them. See, when a storm hits, we know what's in you. We know if you filled your heart with God or all you got's blank. We know exactly what's in. They're on the same plane, the same time. One's reaching out to God, the other, all they've got is blank. Same storm. Now, here's the thing about that. We end up landing. People clap when, you get down, and then we get out, and they bring in another plane. I'm seated here. Jenny's seated here. Cody's seated here. Unknown lady, full of blank, is here. We take off again. We get to the cruising altitude. God is my witness. Pilot comes on, and he says, because this was so stressful, I've told the flight attendants it's now open bar. Probably been on the only 2 flights where drinking was free. And so as a result of that, I'm getting peanuts, Jenny's getting peanuts, Cody's getting peanuts, but this lady starts drinking. And she drinks, and she drinks, and she drinks. And when we get to finally land in Dallas, she's still flying. But I thought, that's all this lady has, is what she drinks. It's the only thing. And it was that day I learned, if happy hour made people happy, she'd have been the happiest person on that plane. Some of you ought to be happier because you know what happy hour is to you. But in the midst of that, here's what happens. It shows what's in you. So when you get in a storm, 3 things. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. When you're in a storm, you're not always going to get warning. And when you're in a storm, we're going to find out what's on the inside of you. But number 4, Jesus specializes in bad weather days. That's what his specialty is. He knows how to help people during bad weather days. In Mark chapter 4, it says this. It says in Mark chapter 4, it says that Jesus had been preaching all day, and as he had been preaching all day, he's tired. He gets in a boat. He tells his disciples, we're going to go to the other side. He does like most preachers do after they finish preaching. He's tired. He gets in the boat, and he falls asleep. He takes a nap. Now, remember, of these 12 guys, 3 of these individuals are professional fishermen. They're used to being out there. They're used to being there. And in the midst of them used to being there, they knew what to do. But this storm's so bad that they can't do anything. So Jesus is asleep. One of the disciples goes and he wakes Jesus up, and here are the words, don't you care? See, that's what people think when a storm happens. That God just doesn't care. Don't you care? And Jesus gets up, but it utters these words. It says, but the boat is now full of water. Now, you guys are in Florida. You got water everywhere. Let me ask you this. What happens to a boat that's now full of water? Say it out loud. What happens to it? It says this boat is now full of water, but it's not sinking. The boat's now full of water, but it's not sinking. The boat is now full of water, and it's not sinking. See, to some of you, your biggest takeaway in this message is this. If I ever see that short white guy get on a plane, I'm not getting on that plane with him. That's been your entire thought. Man, if he's on the plane, I'm getting off. I'm not getting on that plane with him. I'm no way. He gets on, I'm not. Pilot may even get off. Don't get on the plane with the short white guy. And so that's what your thought is, but you missed the part of the message, and the part of the message is this. Of all planes you want to get on mine. Because when I get on the plane, Jesus gets on that plane. And see, it doesn't matter if it has lightning, we're getting where we're going. It doesn't matter if we have extreme turbulence, we're getting where we're going. And it doesn't matter if in the midst of that we lose an engine, we're getting where we're going, because that boat was now full of water. It should be sinking, and it's not sinking. When Jesus is on your boat, you can't go under. So when Jesus is on your boat, it can be full of water, but you're not going to sink. It can get hit by lightning, but you're not going down. You can have extreme turbulence, but you're going to make it. You can lose an engine, but you're going to do it. Why? Because Jesus is on the boat. When Jesus is on the boat, you get where Jesus said you needed to go, and you get on that boat. But the question is Jesus on your boat? See, some of you came to church today. That doesn't mean Jesus is on your boat. It means you chose for an hour and 15 minutes to get on a boat with him. But you and I both know there's people who come to church for an hour and 15 minutes, and they'll put up with whatever's going on. And then they'll leave. And their life is no different than it's ever been. Because when they leave, Jesus stays here. Next time I come to church, Jesus, that's when you get to speak to my life. Next time I show up, that's when you get to do something. Next time I show up, that's when you get to. I'm giving you, God, an hour and 15 minutes whenever I come to church. Change my life. But the question is, not are you on his boat on Sunday, do you let him on your boat on Monday? But if Jesus is on your boat, there's nothing this world can do to stop God's will from happening in your life. It's there. You're not going to go anywhere. You're not going down. You're not going under. You're not going anything. And you have allowed Jesus to be on your boat. But I've pastored long enough. See, some people think as long as Jesus is on grandma's boat, it's enough. As long as Jesus is on mama's boat, it's enough. As long as Jesus is on my wife's boat, it's enough. My girlfriend's boat, it's enough. You got to understand something. I was raised on military bases. I know what tough men look like. And I watch every week tough guys walk into church, and they think they're covered because their wife goes to church. But in life, it's not Jesus being on your wife's boat, it's you allowing Jesus to be on your boat. So in life, what have you done? Have you allowed him to be on your boat? And if you have, it can now be full of water, but you're going to get where you're going. You may not feel good, but you're going to get where you're going. Your marriage may not look good, but you're going to get where you're going. Life may not seem good, but you're going to get where you're going when Jesus is on your boat.